So this meeting is being recorded. We will have a roll call. We'll start with
Good evening, Leonard Hall is present.
Good evening, everyone. Danica Belknap, present. Clerk.
Broderick Hugh, present.
Jonathan Gale, present.
All right. I'd like to entertain the idea of setting our next meeting for Wednesday, August 7th at 5:30 p.m. to get that out of the way. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
You should do a roll call, Robbie, because I'm on Zoom.
that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Gale. All right, so we have that set. Chairman's remarks. I just wanted to address the body and anybody who would like to listen for public record. Since our last meeting, we did incorporate the idea and the action of including public input at the after a motion had been made and seconded and opened up for discussion. Those inclusions from the members obviously will get their time to address the motion as they feel and debate as they feel necessary. But that will be limited, the time limit will be limited to 3 minutes, and then the public will have an option to also chime in, and that will be limited to a minute going forward, just so we're on the same page. And I'd also like to make sure that everybody, all of the members have a chance to speak, going back and watching some historical events, everybody has a chance to speak before another person chimes in. And also for the sake of the meeting, I'd like to make sure that everybody knows to be recognized, so that way for purposes of closed captioning and other people watching in, we're not stepping on each other's words. So I'd like to just make that statement. So then some housekeeping also. I did attend the Board of Selectmen meeting last month. Our Facebook page was approved. So just let the group know that that has taken place, and we, as see fit, we can add that to the agenda to get that going and a discussion and or subcommittee, however we want to go on with that. Also, I think that's all I got for everybody. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move into discussion and presentation. And this is, we have a special presentation tonight. I sent out I cast a net out in our community of individuals, chairs of other committees within the town and or their representatives, and also the members of this body also did the same. So tonight we do have two people that we would like to welcome with us. I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourselves, as this is now open for discussion and presentation until 6:05. So welcome, both of you. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Laura Smith, and I'm on the DDIC.
And I am Kevin Smith, Chair of Parks and Recreation Commission.
So, Mr. Hall, do you want to maybe brief the body and the community on what the purpose of what we're doing tonight is? I think that you can speak it, put it eloquently.
Jeff Caballo of the Planning Board has been working diligently, reaching out to various committees in the town of Dayton in an effort to develop a development plan that takes into consideration the needs of conservation, the needs of industrial development, parks and recreation. And what he had his first joint meeting. The focus, as it applies to open space, would be in the areas of agriculture and recreation. On the issue of affordable housing, I'm going to let Mr. Gale speak on that, since he is a member of the 40B committee. One of the things that the town of Dayton has been requested, mandated, if you would, to submit to the governor's office by December 31st of this year, is a development plan that takes into consideration affordable housing and housing for people with disabilities as well. And I give Mr. Caballo a lot of credit. He is working very hard, reaching out to committees to try to get the ball rolling. At the last joint meeting, we talked a lot about Park and Rec. And one of the areas that he was really interested in us pursuing, and I know it caught Mr. Smith's attention, was passive recreation. And we had some discussion about preserving land for nature trails and also for hunting. And hunting is very big in Dayton. It is a very popular sport, if you will. And the beauty of that is it's seasonal. So working, and the whole idea of creating the land trust, which is a discussion that Jeff has also been spurring people's interest. Raising money through grants, donations, trusts, wills, if you will. Putting aside land to be used for that purpose would be ideal. It would also help with preserving nature. It would also help to some degree to control growth. And one of the biggest problems that this town has is that everybody has an idea about growth for the town or no growth for the town. But we've never put anything in writing. Regarding that, the Healy administration for the first time is kind of holding towns, cities and towns accountable. And one of the things that it's definitely doing for Dayton is getting them to start talking about it. So I'd like to hear what Mr. Smith's ideas are in regards to what he'd like to see, quote unquote, passive recreation, and how we can help him do that.
Can I start off with a question?
Sure.
So I'm gonna go back in my memory bank for a second. This question is specifically for Danica. Wasn't Serpent working on like conservation subdivision bylaws? Is that still?
Yeah, that's a project that's still open. We had met, the project manager at Serpent working on that had met with like a joint committee meeting with the planning board and several other boards in town, and is now working on drafting some recommendations to then review with the boards. So there will be we will come back and like meet with the boards again and get input and discuss next steps.
Yeah, because I know we kind of talked about, different aspects, just to circle back to that, different aspects of that related to Parks and Rec, like, with playgrounds within, development, they were either private or public, funded by the developers, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of want to circle back on that, because I think that's part of the overall conversation on how we all move forward together. As far as passive, given the way that the Parks and Rec Commission is compromised, one, and the budget that we have, passive recreation is our best friend, because it's, you know, kind of a one-time investment. It could be a gift, it could be a trust, it could be, you know, grant funded, but once that is pretty, you know, low cost to maintaining those types of things, you know, like the Trails Committee, which is its own identity, but does a great job of maintaining their trails with a little bit of help from the highway department. So just, you know, the passive recreation is probably the easiest thing for us to help facilitate, because it doesn't require a lot of additional maintenance or cost. So we're super attracted to that. It does keep a hold on some of Dayton's history, you know, with whether it be hunting, fishing, hiking, you know, there's a pretty good group of people who bird watch in Dayton. There's a lot of outdoor activities that happen that don't, you know, require any type of equipment. They literally just need the outdoor space. So I think that's a great opportunity for us. And just kind of overall, you know, just a broad thought on this conversation is like, I told Robbie before, and he was unaware, I had the liberty of chairing this at one point. And I really think like trying to move towards this and get participation and interaction from other committees is awesome if we can kind of keep the ball rolling together, because it's many hands make for light work. Like I can only do so much from parks, you can only do so much from open space, you can only do so much from TDIC. But if we're all like collaboratively tossing ideas off each other or working together on initiatives, I think then we'll actually be able to accomplish stuff. Because we had even back, you know, probably a year and a half ago, tried to mold the open space committee into something like the CPC looks like, where you have representatives from different groups, but all of us are all on these groups.
Representing.
It's like, yeah, so we're already so ingrained in these other things, it's, you know, it's tough to find the time. So I do like this collaborative effort, and I think it's, especially when you're talking about grant funding and things like that, the more voices you have when you're doing, you know, grant applications, the better. You know, open space is backing it up, conservation is backing it up, Parks and Rec is backing it up. It makes it more attractive, so.
May I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Do you have grant writing experience?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm you know, willing to
Just
help.
curious. You're gonna put that in the back of my.
There's another guy on Zoom too, he's okay at it.
Because Jonathan had mentioned that he had done it.
Yes. So yeah, actually, Jonathan and I have collaborated before, so we've written ADA grants together.
Okay.
And I've done a couple of the small ones for Parks and Recs, you know, activities.
That could be very.
Because I always think like just as far as securing open space, I'm gonna kind of bounce over to the development side of, you know, what Lenny's talking about too, is there's a big desire in this town to curb development. And I know we hear about it with Forest Hills, for example, and I've had a couple of conversations with town residents, and the best way to combat that is to not kick the can down the road and put it to litigation. The best way to do it is to engage Audubon societies and other, you know, land trust organizations that can fund this, and we need to identify parcels that are worth keeping and buy them and put them into land trusts, you know, because we're not gonna, at the end of the day, we're not gonna win, but just,
No, you're not.
yeah, pushing it down the road. So I think, working together, we might be able to identify a space where it's like, oh, you know, that might be a great place for active recreation, you know, like I can say, I think this would be a good piece to do soccer fields, for instance, or some other sports fields. So, you know, a little bit more collaborative work together on that.
Do you have anything you wanted to add? Let me just give Jennifer a chance. Did you?
You can go ahead if you're gonna say something.
Kevin, once the land trust was established, can CPC contribute to the purchase of land for passive recreation?
Absolutely. That's actually probably one of the most attractive avenues to use CPC funding for, like above any other thing. Conserving open spaces probably would be especially, I don't want to speak on behalf of our entire committee, But I think that would probably be one of the most attractive proposals that could be brought before our CPC, because I think everyone is of the attitude that we're have dwindling, recreational, whether it's passive or active, but dwindling recreational opportunities, and we'd like to see that expanded. So we even took note of that during, not so much this year, we didn't get a ton of feedback during our annual public meeting for CPC, but the year prior, because we were having conversations about the library, and people did express that they wanted to see more open space funding done. It's just you have to have, there has to be somebody that brings that to the table for CPC, which it could be, collectively, Parks and Rec and or trails and open space, or all three of us together. So
Will you repeat the question one more time, just so we all have it like firmed in our head, what we just answered?
Once the land trust is established, can CPC funds be used toward the purchase of land for passive recreation?
That answer was in the affirmative. Thank you
Yes.
very much. Great, that was great talk.
And if I may,
Yeah.
tying in, Ms. Smith is very much involved in agriculture, both professionally and as a member of the Bristol Aggie trustees. I see the opportunity, and I'm wondering if the Aggie could help us, that if we were to purchase land, I heard mention bird watching, butterflies, helping to create, I mean, it's not just agriculture, we're into horticulture as well, and helping, working with conservation of developing those lands to attract birds and butterflies for those people who like to do that.
I love that idea.
I just see, the potential between Park and Rec, agriculture, and conservation, creating something nice.
no, absolutely, because I mean, you could take a piece of land that, has been kind of raw and untouched, and almost create, through having Bristol Aggie perform agriculture on it, you create an ecosystem where you're inviting, those things, the birds, butterflies, all that stuff. I know, like, I remember even like DCR, to an extent, to engaging them is also a good idea too, because it's like, I remember down at the Francis Crane Management Area on the Cape, it seems like it would be counterproductive, but it actually worked out beautifully. They did actually quite a large cutting to restore grasslands, because it introduced and helped preserve habitat for, numerous amounts of birds that they had noticed were starting to have their, population dwindle in the area. So there's, some other avenues with the state that we could together engage the state to work on some of that as well.
Ms. Smith, do you get a lot of students, or let's say youngsters, maybe people out of it within high school or younger, who are interested in open space and or recreation within Dayton, who approach you and say, what is the town doing? Or is there more? Or how can we help? Or
I have not had anyone approach me with that.
would that be a normal situation for somebody to approach you though?
I don't think so.
No, I mean, so like amongst the students though, is there like, or in the faculty, is there any talk of kids getting more active within the town? Is there a volunteer base within that?
I think, well, they're always willing to
Okay,
have the kids do stuff within the community.
of course. And of course, there are kids within the school that there's probably a handful that will always be willing, and some that
Yes.
need to be motivated.
And they're some of the departments that they have, there's landscape and there's, I can't think of the name of it, arborist, floral, so it's all things that they're learning in school.
Wonderful.
I think that I was going to suggest was that there are within the school, if open space were potentially to approach different departments in advance, because a lot of the time they do their planning a year in advance. So when the school year starts in September, different departments, horticulture, agriculture, whatever the department might be, they have plans on what their students are going to be doing for the most part during the year in different sessions as the kids matriculate out from, you know, the different programs they're in. So if something came to fruition and we were interested, we might approach the different department heads in advance and say, you know, we're looking at something potentially for January. Can we get it on your radar? And I'm sure they'd want us to submit a plan of what we're looking for, a plan of action and a plan of development, so that they can consider that at what they're going to take on at that point. And I think that might be a way for us to consider it, is that we're going to have to look at what the departments can offer based on the numbers of students they have and the projects that they want to have on their plate.
Thank you.
What type of projects are we thinking the students could help with, like trail maintenance type stuff, or?
Well, I do know Mr. Cavallo wants to have us back. There was some miscommunication for the joint meeting, and Open Space was invited, but they never got the message. So he was hoping to have another joint meeting with Conservation, Park and Rec, us, and the planning board. And we probably should reach out to Jeff to see when he would like to do that, because I believe the enthusiasm is there.
And just so we're all on the same page, that's in relation to the students at the school, or?
Well, you have to identify, before you
The
go to
plan
the
itself.
school, you have to have a plan. You know, I do know Bristol Plymouth has done out here. What they've done over the library is off the charts. It's helped the town of Dayton, but it's great for the students, the pride and the work that they've done and on their resumes. And I think there should be an opportunity for Bristol Aggie, or if it doesn't exist, something, if you could convince them that, you know, we will come up with projects if they can provide the labor.
Well, my goal is what we're doing is we're in the process of going through this master plan. You saw this honking PDF I threw at you, I'm sorry, without giving much detail. Thank you for giving those bullet points, by the way, that I did send along. Thank you. But I would like, we do have a plan here in front of us. We've got 32 action items that have been approved by the town that we have, you know, we can put all or some of our energy towards. I think it would be wise to keep the conversation going with the other committees. I know I sent a couple of people that did respond. Jeff Carvalho did respond. He couldn't be here tonight. He forwarded the invite along to his committee members. I sent it to the Conservation Commission. Lisa responded. She was not able to come. I think she's on vacation actually, so she will be returning in a week or two. So we'll keep that conversation going. I mean, just generally speaking, not as like a promise or anything, but I think a good idea would be for us to continue going through this 34-point plan. And really what we started to do last week was figure out which committees were responsible or probably more responsible than others, or how we could help identify which committee would be facilitating our help, helping us on the other hand. And as we go through it, we can target and identify action items that could include the youngsters to come and lend a hand. And then also as we continue to open the door with other things, not to leave Parks and Rec off the table, but as it pertains to things in this action plan.
Leave me out. I was just to kind of note off of, you know, engaging the school. I think it's a good, this just popped in my head with some of the comments that were made in it. We always reach out for help when we have a specific project, but it really wouldn't hurt to do a little bit of public outreach, even if it's just with flyers and things like that. There might be kids that want to get involved with some of this. Like, I have a 9-year-old that loves to come to meetings and take notes and then recap with me on the way home, like, she's into it. So it's like, I think you would be surprised, because there's really no, I mean, with it, but we obviously, you don't want little kids running around your meetings, but I think high school students who are interested in how town government works, how these committees work, there's probably, an untapped resource just to get some young minds thinking about what we do, and then kind of, I wouldn't use this word, grooming the next generation to kind of, take over for all of us, because this, none of us are getting any younger, so it's like engaging those kids and getting them involved at the high school level would be a great way to kind of get young, fresh minds with new ideas, because
But I think it's important to ask those kids, what is it that you're gonna come up, if you stay in this town and you continue to live here and you raise your next family here, what is it that you wanna see for yourself and or your children next? And I mean, I think, we can even answer that question amongst ourselves. I know people here with and expecting, right? So, and then, don't know everybody's situation, but you probably have neighbors that you've seen come and go that, we need to engage them and see what is important right now, I hear the pickleball courts are a success.
it's busy.
Yeah.
Busy. Success, I'm not gonna comment on that at the moment.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that, we've talked about many ideas, but unfortunately, they'll remain ideas. And we talked about money, so it looks like there are ways to raise money. But until we create the land trust, we're just spinning our wheels. Has there been any group in town who has taken the ball to run with this, to get it started? And if there isn't, is this something open space could do?
So I do recall, again, when I was on the committee, and I can try to go back through like some of my archives and conversations that I've had. There was actually some grant opportunities to like engage local landowners. So say it's like, a farmer that is, getting to an age where they no longer can operate a farm, but they might be of the attitude that they want to see that land, go into a conservation trust. There was some grant funding to do public outreach for that and then get these folks hooked up with the right legal counsel to navigate putting land in a land trust. It's like one of those things that you don't know until you ask, and it doesn't hurt to have a conversation with somebody. They might be interested in simply donating the land. But there was a whole program through like open space at the state level where you could.
So would that, I'm sorry, about the trust itself, would that sit in the hands of the town?
Yeah.
Or would that be a private nonprofit or like a quasi situation, or is anything on the table?
My best suggestion with that is like, I would contact a town that is successful with it. I'm gonna throw Dartmouth out there, because Dartmouth is like, just incredible with,
Open space.
open space.
Yeah, I think Ipswich is pretty great.
So, like, I think it's DNRT, like, those are the folks that you wanna talk to and be like, I'm always a big fan of let's not reinvent the wheel, if somebody else did it right, let's piggyback off of their steps, or at least take, good chunks of it and run with it. So I would like, in my opinion, open space, much like all of our volunteer committees, we're strictly, making recommendations. We don't really have any, teeth. So like, as far as land takings and stuff, it would probably fall under the selectmen if it was town-owned property. Like, ultimately, the board of selectmen would be the gatekeepers of the land trust, but.
We can do
Or
that.
actually, it could be conservation too, in our instance, it could be conservation, especially if it's put into a conservation land trust.
But which
Put
one's
into an agricultural land trust, you have the agricultural committee who could, facilitate that. I think the board of selectmen would be the final stewards of of the trust.
And Serena Amaral, town accountant, does have the ability to manage it for us, not run it, but manage the money for accounting purposes and consistency, because as you know, committee chair, committee treasurers, clerks, they come and go.
Mhm.
But town auditor will always be there.
I do know that CCOG has a land trust, if you also wanna reach out to, other towns. They actually helped me, because I have land in CCOG, and I put some land into APR, Agricultural Preservation Restriction. And so the state gave us money, and the land trust also gave money.
So it was a win-win.
So, yeah, and that's,
Everybody
you could have put
benefited.
in 11 houses, but instead it would always be farmed.
There's two different grant opportunities that come up, and they usually are due around June 30th from the state. One's park, PARC, and the other one is just land. Both have opportunities. So the land grant from the state, which I believe is both of them are through DCR. One is strictly to purchase land, and it would be for passive recreation, or it could be for agricultural or just strictly conservation. But then the park grant, like, so if we identified something where it was a parcel that could be used to, that incorporate, like I said before, whether it's sports fields, playground, whatever. There's a couple different avenues too, and funding streams there where we could, you couldn't really tie it to a land trust. That's kind of be its own separate thing, but there is two big opportunities to secure parcels of land. Because like, just to kind of circle back to Lenny's earlier question, like with CPC, like I think CPC would certainly be of the attitude that if we could fund something, we would. But like CPC funding is not as, vast as some people think it may be.
Why I say CPC, I'm looking at it at this stage of development as seed money. We obviously have a lot of work to do reaching out to grants and like the Audubon Society and different groups for contributions. Maybe even down the road if an organization wanted to do a fundraiser to help raise money for the trust. We do have an agricultural committee. Would they want conservation? Would they want to hold a fundraiser to help raise money for preservation of land, for bird watching, for butterfly, just open space for Bambi and Thumper? There are a great many people out there who want to preserve land, just open space, land, woods. And that becomes important for Dayton to remain the rural community that it so has desired over the years to maintain. And we're hearing that from those people who are speaking out against development. And we do, if we don't plan, we run the risk of changing what Dayton looks like. We really are, and what majority of the people want Dayton to be. And that's my fear. That's why planning is not a bad thing. It is necessary.
Probably the most important thing.
Well, because if we don't do it, the developers will.
I think too, just to kind of give you a little bit of a comparison, we have a great opportunity where there is a large number of residents who want to, stand up against development and preserve open space. So it's like, we need to engage those people and get them involved in things like within establishing the land trust, but you almost have to present it in the same fashion. I'm gonna use the elementary school as an example. So like I, you know, have Lenny as well, we're both on the elementary school building committee. My kids will be long gone from the elementary school age if it happens by the time, you know, it's completed, they'll be long gone. But I wanna make sure that the next group of, you know, Dayton kids have a great place to learn and grow. So you have to kind of get people who are really of the big picture, you know, mind frame to be like, listen, this, you know, might not necessarily help with what's happening in your backyard, but you don't want it to happen to your neighbor's backyard either. So, you know, can you jump on board now and help?
So I wanted to make a note on the land trust portion, because I have worked with a lot of land trusts in the region through my work, so, and I have like some contacts that I could reach out to. Most of the ones that I'm aware of are privately like managed and run, as far as I know. But I can double check that. And in addition to some of the other towns mentioned, Wareham, Westport, Mansfield, they have land trusts that I've worked with before. So happy to help with reaching out to any of those if that's helpful.
Yeah.
I think what's important to consider a little bit too, and I know this issue gets raised quite often, and as with the list of 34 items, we're sort of ferreting some of this out, which is, I don't think it's necessarily the job of open space to identify specifically in some cases what land will be used for, but keeping in mind, I do think we have a responsibility to some extent to encourage the type of use it will be for. So for example, there may be some land that we might think is better off used for mixed space, maybe for quote business/industrial, or you know, housing, for example. But if we're going to consider something for housing, for land for housing, then we want to look at how can we mix use with that for housing and bring into other aspects of it open space for parks and recreation, things like that, or trails within it. So when we look at even a couple of the developments that are currently proposed in town that we talked about already, I think somebody mentioned Forest Hills, and then you have Strawberry Fields, for example. There's a lot of land there that otherwise could be looked at as open space, wetlands areas for trails, for other types of use, bird watching, things that we talked about. I think we want to consider that as well in terms of how it's going to be used, because that's going to come into play with this. And I think going back to what you were saying, Kevin, when we look to the future, it's inevitable the town is somehow going to have to grow in terms of some population. It's going to have to expand in terms of its business base, because that's going to drive, in many ways, that's going to drive the future tax base to the town. And that's going to dictate what the town can and can't do, as well as the housing component. And let's be clear, unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon where you sit, the 40B component, for example, or moderate and low to moderate income housing component is going to dictate to some extent what the town receives for future funds from the state and potentially the federal government. So we have to consider all of that with what we're doing. But again, I don't think it's our responsibility to dictate specifically what it will be used for and how it will be used, but more to identify the type of land that's there as well. Going back to that list that we started working on, I think we ended off at number 18 or something like that. To get back to that, I think that's where it's a good place to take that to at this point, because our goal is to look at where we identify the 30 from that list, what we identify something we should have a potential with, and then we're assigning our validation to it as to where we think we fit. So I'm just throwing it all out there because there's a lot to consider, and I don't want people to feel that we're trying to be dictatorial. We're not. We're trying to indicate the types of use that we think different components of land would be used for.
Actually, well, I mean, yeah, you can each have a minute because we got to move on. Actually, we're gonna, just go ahead, Mr. Smith, you're first.
So quick, I could not disagree with that more. I think the job of the whole, your kind of making yourself sound like you're a combination of the land use committee and the planning board. I think, you know, because you have a lot of work to do, you should only be identifying land that's open space. That's what the name of the committee is. So to say, oh, we think this would be great for development is not your job. I think you should be making every effort to identify the most desirable parcels for active and passive recreation or conservation, and that is it. You kind of get intermingled with DDIC and planning and things like that. So that's kind of my only comment, and that's, again, just my opinion on what I view the Open Space Committee's job as.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, I don't know if that's what Jonathan was trying to say, but what I see as our role for the Open Space Committee is recommending like those priority parcels that we would want to see protected, and like that's kind of our role to advise. And I love hearing that Mr. Carvalho is engaging all the different committees in the town, and because everybody has different perspectives, like no one person is going to decide what gets used for what everywhere, but I think the way he's going about it to put this plan together is a good approach. And I think where we fit in is kind of which lands we want to see protected in the town. I think that's kind of what our task is. I don't know if the other members agree.
Please make it quick, because we do need to move on, Mr. Gale.
All I want to say is that so that it's clear, I don't disagree with what either of you just said. I think what I was saying is really along the same lines. It was just, it was couched differently. So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay. All right. As this was our first discussion and presentation in the fiscal year, I do want to thank our guests for coming tonight. This certainly is not the end of our conversation. It's just the end of our time here tonight with this particular item. With your permission, I can definitely engage you both as we move forward and just send you friendly reminder emails when our meetings are going to be posted, and if and when we're going to have something like this again, another presentation. I think it would be good and beneficial to our committee to have this interaction again. So I'll make sure to keep in touch with both of you. I saw nods in the affirmative. That's okay then. Yes. Okay. So, because I'm not trying to, pinpoint or segregate any one person, or, definitely are also on the other hand, trying not to overwhelm any one person with any responsibility, either perceived or otherwise. So thank you both very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting to see what we're talking about tonight, because we are actually going to be moving into these action items next, so you can see what we're talking about. So with that said, we are going to move on to old business at this time. With what is on the table right now is to discuss, review, and act the actual open space and recreation plan that we've been referring to tonight.
Thank you. I would say we'll be here. Me, Jonathan, talking to you. Have a good night. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
All right, so we are actually on item number 15, if I'm not mistaken. I think we left off on 14 and we are now at 15. And my goal is to do this until about 10 till or so, when we need to move on. Unfortunately, we do, the agenda tonight does have us moving into, as tradition has it, we do need to set committee roles for the new fiscal year. And then I do want to open it up for public input, which, Ms. Smith, you're welcome to join in again and touch on anything that we've talked about if you'd like. And then anybody who might join us on Zoom is welcome to do so also. We will move on to the minutes. We're only going to talk about January 3rd tonight. I'm sorry, June 5th. And we'll try and be out of here by 7. So number 15 is preserve, in section 9, I should be more specific, of the Open Space Committee 2021-2028 Recreation, Open Space and Recreation Plan. We are on page 53 of the PDF, section 9, number 15. The action is to preserve cultural, historic, and heritage landscapes assets in the town. Potential partners could be the Historical Commission, Historical Society, Conservation, Planning, ZBA, the Inspector, CBC, Ag, the Dayton Intertribal Council, DCR Preservation Program, and any others as needed. So what we've been doing is identifying the committees maybe that are openly or actively involved in these items. I have notes that say DDIC and Ag are closely related to this. Do we have any knowledge of any actions, or is this something that we need to,
Well, I'm a little confused because the DDIC is more looking for land for the development of commercial and industrial properties. I do know when I was a member of the DDIC, and I'm still doing it, is reaching out to realtors because they work with people who are looking. And I know last week, 3 different businesses, including a meeting with one, to talk about what their needs are. And reaching out then with a realtor saying, look, we've got these people looking for this. Do you have anyone that has land available? Do you have any people who are looking to come into Dayton? Well, I'll take it and we'll switch it. Talk about open space. And I do know of one big farm on William Street in Dayton who gave Dayton the first right to refuse a large piece of farmland, but because the town didn't have the money, couldn't buy it. Now, a land trust would have preserved that farm in its natural habitat.
so what's that have to do with number 15?
Well.
We're talking about number 15, Mr. Hull.
Yes, but in regards to DDIC, I don't.
Yeah, I think I
see
misspoke.
that.
It must be just Ag that's related
Oh,
to
okay.
this. Yeah.
Okay, not DDIC?
No.
Sorry, because,
No, I was just asking if anybody,
I don't-
I was not identifying, I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, number 15, and FYI, I apologize for not being able to raise my hand tonight. I'm in a place where I have to use my iPhone, and it's not as easy to do that, so I apologize when I interrupt, just once acknowledge. Could you tell me, for number 15, do we currently have anyone in town specifically that can identify, for example, tribal land and historical land in that nature? Because to me, number 15 throws that out as an important consideration.
I mean, I would imagine that just to respond to your question, the Dayton Intertribal Council would be my first resource to answer that question, but any direct knowledge I do not have.
Okay.
Is there an active historic commission in town?
yes,
Yes.
Yeah,
very active.
okay. So
That would-
maybe they would be good ones to engage.
Yeah, that would be Pat, wouldn't it? I believe Pat Gales.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Chairman, we may want to reach out to Pat for some of these later as we work, when we work through the list.
Yeah, I think just in terms of thinking about like our role in these tasks, this seems like something that would be most relevant to the Historic Commission and the Intertribal Council. But if there were an instance where maybe like land protection to preserve some of these resources was in question, maybe we could support on that.
And I think an intertribal council, if nothing else, between Pat and intertribal potentially could help identify what we need to know about what pieces of land would be covered under number 15 here.
All right.
But I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we can definitely answer what our role is in this yet for this particular item.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I agree. I think that as a committee as a whole, I think we're just going through this for the first time as a group. So, I mean, really, I think we're making, our goal was to make us, pass through all 34 items and then make another pass to figure out where we can focus our energy, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. So having identified the Historic Commission and the Dayton Intertribal Council as other committees that could help facilitate or necessitate any I guess, programming as it's related to preservation or preserving asset in the town would be.
Mr. Holt, do you know potentially who the person is for intertribal council in the town?
Not specifically, there is some division, so there's actually two groups, but Mr. Ken Pacheco would be more knowledgeable on that, former selectman. And he's also a member of the Historical Commission.
Okay.
I have a comment on this, you want me to wait till public comment? Input, I mean?
I mean, normally, yeah, that would be the situation.
Okay.
Does it have to be?
I mean, we could, if there's a motion on the floor to suspend the rules,
So, second,
is there a motion?
Sure.
And there's a second. All right, is there a vote? There's a motion on the floor to suspend the rules.
roll call.
Jonathan, I.
Yep, aye.
Leonard Hall, aye.
Danica Belknap, aye.
Robert Gear, aye. The chair would like to recognize Ms. Smith.
As part of the DDIC, couple meetings ago, we did talk about, Mr. Reynolds looking to see what parcels of land are available. And he was gonna map them all out. And as part of agriculture, like myself and Barbara Batavia could go look at them to see if they would be potential land for farmers to rent from the town. So that's my input on that. So
Nice.
somebody is looking into that in DDIC.
Wonderful, wonderful, okay. So we're going to put DDAC on there too. So that is something that's happening, okay, great.
And that brings in business when people are farming.
Right.
On the same token, you know, we're doing, the DDIC is doing it for agriculture. Could we also look, members of open space participate as well, looking at it for potential preservation or use for passive recreation?
Right, good thoughts.
One of the things that happens with a lot of the land that the town takes over for taxes is that the land is not usable, it is not of value, and people get tired of paying taxes on it, so they'll dump it. Well, that land that might be wet or of no economic value could be valuable for the habitat of another animal, another, you know, butterfly or bird. And with that, reaching out to other groups, conservation, agriculture, see how they could create a habitat for whatever they're trying to attract, species of animal.
All important things. All right, so we move on to another number 16, if there's no other discussion about number 15. All right. Number 16, the action item reads, develop community education programs and materials to promote conservation and environmental awareness, as well as opportunities for stewardship. Local lead partners, potential partners could include conservation, the Open Space Committee, Stormwater, SERPID, the Ag Commission, TRSC, TRWA, Bristol Aggie, and others as needed. I think
I'm gonna,
Actually, yeah, give me 1 second. I was just gonna say that I think that Kevin Smith started the conversation when he talked about community outreach. I was at a local nursery on Sunday morning, and I thought it would be great if on a busy Saturday morning, Open Space Committee had a table with pamphlets available to people who are interested in like-minded things, you know? So I think we have an opportunity there. Yes, Mr. Gale?
No, I was agreeing with you. I didn't mean to stop you there, but I totally agree. I think it's definitely in our purview to provide information and resource to the community. It's something to look down the road on how we're going to do it and how we're going to put material together. But absolutely, this is in our wheelhouse.
I agree. I think we should see what other committees and groups are already doing and try to work with them and not duplicate what others are doing. So I think we should do a little more research, but I agree.
Now, when we say see what other committees are doing, when we be a little more specific in terms of promoting conservation and environmental awareness, like specifically, like, is that what we want to know what they're doing, or do we want to know what they're doing behind the scenes?
This is an interesting question you're asking, because, for example, if we're going to have a table, to use, your thought process, or a space where we're going to provide information, do we want to provide information on, for example, what Trails Committee is doing, what Concom is doing, what what Stormwater is doing? Do we want to kind of be the resource and the conduit providing that information, along with perhaps putting together information of what we feel our mantra is based on our mission statement? Or do we want to do it differently? Because that may be the way to do it, without reinventing the wheel from what each of these different committees or commissions are already trying to put out there.
My only thought on that is the amount of time that we would be taking on if we were to be willing to be that kind of go-to resource for the community of all things open space, as those lines blur between Parks and Rec and or trails and or et cetera, et cetera. I went to the selectmen meeting, like I said, last month, and Conservation Commission has a trifold pamphlet, nicely printed in color, set on one of the counters as you walk into your right, that you can just see a little bit more about what Conservation Commission is doing, and maybe what their hot buttons are about fertilizer runoff, or et cetera, you know what I mean? And who to contact if you have questions, right? So their agent is listed with an email address and phone number. And not that we would be contacted per se, but now that we know that a Facebook page has been approved and we've put content towards that, we can certainly be the arbiter of information. I have no problem, I think that, bless you, I think that would be a great way to activate the community. I would just make sure that we don't act like I would hope we don't become that we think we're the voice for other committees, especially since we are in part an appointed, just a voice anyway. Like Kevin said, we don't have teeth. There are actual bodies that facilitate mechanisms that keep this stuff moving and in order. So that's all I've got to say on that.
Yeah. I think to that, that's all the more reason why we should talk to other groups and just coordinate with work with them. And we could share, if we're at an event, we can share information from their group. If they're at an event, they can share information from our group, can work together. Because I think it would be a lot for any one committee to be kind of like the voice for everything,
And yeah.
Well, we could sponsor the table, for example, if you will. But if other committees are going to have information there, I think, a caveat is that since we don't want to speak for them or on behalf of them, is if somebody's going to have information there, Parks and Rec, for example, that they have somebody from Parks and Rec there to answer the information. But it would at least make sense that open space, quote unquote, be the sponsor of the table, if you will.
At an event like Cow Chip Festival or Strawberry Fest. You're thinking of something like that, or even a table at Arujo Farms on a Saturday morning. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, I am. So that we're not speaking, we can sponsor the table. Open Space is sponsoring a table to educate residents about certain assets or events or community property, whatever we have to couch it in the town. But I don't think to go exactly to what the two of you are saying, so that we're not answering on behalf of other organizations in town, we can be the conduit or sponsor. That's the educational component that we keep talking about. As long as we're not, if Parks and Rec is gonna have somebody there, or CPC, or planning board or stormwater, then they should have somebody there to answer the questions. I don't want to answer something for stormwater that I don't know about and I'm not familiar with. I don't want to put myself in that position, but I am happy to provide the table and a chair for somebody to sit and help educate the community.
So what I think I'm hearing is open space would be interested in participating at the community level on a person-to-person situation, like a booth almost, for lack of a better term, I guess, right? A 10 by 10 or something, and a 6-foot table or something, 2 chairs, right? Where open space would man the situation, and then we would be willing to have anybody else and cast that net out again to anybody who, as it relates to open space, right? To
Correct.
join in and wanted to participate. On the other hand, they're also welcome to do the same too, so.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't want to take from anything they're doing, but I think if the table is quote unquote open space table with different venues there, it just gives a little bit of a spotlight to the concept of open space.
Her video turned off. I don't know why. Oh.
Regards to that.
Yeah, Christian Cole.
What I'm hearing, and I know the firecracker is coming up in September, this might be a future meeting, some discussion about us having a table at the firecracker. Talk about what open space does and anything that we'd be advocating for.
I absolutely agree. I like this action item. I think this speaks to our committee specifically. I mean, yes, there are partners that we could partner with and cascade information along. But I'd almost be willing to carry this action item over into like a discuss and act and review and see if there's something that we should extrapolate from this, even if it's just a printed flyer that we could have presented with contact information, meeting date, first Monday of every month, come to the open space meeting, whatever that might look like, whatever graphic is included. Wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel, could even contact Conservation Commission and ask them for the template and just revise the language, bring it, as an individual, one of us could individually do it with our free time, bring it back to the committee, and include that as something we might want to entertain. I just throw that out there. Yes, sir.
Do you have a budget for that?
Open Space does not have a budget for fiscal year 2025, I'm afraid.
Okay. So
That would be a volunteer situation. Yeah, somebody would have to volunteer to print those things.
Or a sponsor.
Or a sponsor, yeah. I think that we should. Yes, sir.
We have we do have our mission statement. And our mission statement on a flyer, along with when we meet and an invite for residents to participate in the process, along with inviting others from other committees to have a seat at the table and have their flyers there. Potentially, that doesn't take much in the way of a budget. It takes maybe a couple of us volunteering to sit at the table and reaching out to the other committees to see if they want to join us at the table, literally, and have their flyers. And the budget component, unless we had a sponsor, because we don't have any money unless we have a sponsor to offer them, magnets or anything like that to put on a refrigerator. But other than that, what we're looking at is asking the town hall to perhaps print up, 150, 200 flyers, which I'm sure they would do.
All right.
think this is a
I'm
good
not in a
conversation to
position
return to.
anymore say if they would or they wouldn't.
All right, I think, here's what I propose. At our next meeting, we extrapolate this action item, we discuss review, and we will act on putting together some language. If anybody in their free time between now and then individually would like to put something together to prepare it and present to the committee, that includes myself individually, just as a template to keep this ball rolling, that would be great.
And so we could present that, we could prepare that and maybe put it on the website for now. I don't know if we have our mission statement on the website, but we still have that as an option. That's free to us. We can post on the website. If we table at events, post it at our table.
Right. All right, so let's go ahead, I'm gonna add number 16, a tri-fold flyer draft. And we'll just spend a little bit of time talking about what exactly we want on the content on that flyer. How about that? Sound good?
Sure.
Sound good? Nice.
And I would just say that I have an industrial printer, not color, but an industrial printer with heavy stock. So if nobody else can do it, or we don't have anyone to do a trifold or something like that, if it's set up, then I can run the print on it. I have no problem with that.
Wonderful, thank you. Number 17, protect and preserve surface and groundwater resources, including important recharge and future potential water supply areas. I'm gonna guess that stormwater has the lead on something like this. Potential partners are the Water District, Public Works, Stormwater, Conservation, Planning, ZBA, BOH, DEP, and others.
And I think the town bylaws do have the zoning has a protection district specifically for this purpose, like a water resource protection district.
Our action, then I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Gill.
No, I agree, it does, yes.
I think even a statement on our trifold flyer about protecting and preserving surface and groundwater resources and how to find best practices within those would suffice. Really, you could kind of say we did 17 check.
Right.
I would just add to this, maybe we're not the ones to say what those areas are, but that we should be considering those in, if we were to put together a list of priority areas for protection of open space, this should be a consideration. And I think in our mission statement, it not that exactly, but water resources is listed as.
I mean, and just to be good stewards within our communities and in our own land is, and to share that with others and best practices, I think, is carrying that message forward. We're good there. Yeah, right. We good. Right, number 18, unless there's anything else on 17?
Nope.
We're gonna continue, then thank you. We'll continue to update the ADA 504 transition plan for all town conservation, park and recreation holdings. Potential local lead partners include conservation, recreation, open space, the selectmen, the ADA compliance officer, the disability committee, and others as appropriate and or needed. I think, Mr. Hull, would you like to speak to this?
Well,
I'm sorry, my mistake.
Mr. Gale,
Mr. Gale, would you like to speak to this?
Actually, no, yeah, of course I will. So the answer, I was going to defer to somebody who I thought would probably know very little about it, just as sarcasm, but I won't. So, what I'm going to say is yes. I think really we look at when we look as the ADA coordinator and as the former chair of the ADA commission, we look at everything in open space already, whether it's looking at park space, whether it's looking at other space, as the potential for having ADA access, ADA availability, resources for individuals with disabilities, how individuals with disability can make use of a parcel of land or a piece, how it fits into the equation. And not all of it does, and some of it will never, to be clear about that. But I don't think that that's a real spot here. Honestly, I don't think that that's something that open space really needs to consider as a priority, because there are so many other ways it's already being looked at and will be looked at no matter what happens with a piece of land. So, if it's farm use, but it's going to have public access, for example, if it's going to be public farming, and I'll use the example of the community garden, there's public access there. So what we did is we made sure that we have mats down, which are rubber mats for wheelchairs, and we have a couple of our beds, if you've been over there, that are raised. And if there's other pieces of land that are or parcels that would fall into that, we're going to make sure that it meets some criteria, because we have to by statute. So I don't think it's something that I'm not saying it shouldn't be here, it should, but it's not something that needs to be a high priority on our radar.
So then, speaking are you willing to speak as the ADA coordinator right now and take off your open space hat for 1 second?
That's sort of what I'm doing.
Would you then be willing to approach Open Space Committee if and when it's time for you to update your 504 plan? And if you needed any of our assistance, we can count on you to count on us?
Absolutely, and that would be an expectation, yes.
Okay. So then I guess I'm gonna kind of put a little check mark next to 18.
Right. So the end caveat there, Mr. Chairman, is that you're always going to hear me for anything that we discuss in terms of any piece of land, no matter what its use. You'll hear me at least with a line or two of how it may or may not fit in. And then that will determine, whether there's discussion necessarily to be had or not.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. All righty, then we'll move on to number 19, unless there's any other conversation. And just, we'll spend about 5 more minutes on this before we move on a little bit. So this will probably be the last one we talk about tonight. Number 19 is develop a capital improvement plan for Parks and Recreation. Partners include Selectmen, Finance, Rec, the town leagues, town league programs, sports, and others as appropriate.
Right, league programs, I don't know if Mr. Smith is still there or not, but league programs, for example, might include the baseball league, for example, or the softball league, things like that, or the private leagues that have basketball, things going on, or pickleball. And I think that's what that's referring to.
There was just a comma after the word leagues and program, and so I thought it might be a typo in there. That's why I hesitated. I apologize. It made sense in the back of my head. So then I would imagine that Parks and Rec, and just for the record, Mr. Gale, Kevin did leave for the evening. He did excuse himself.
Okay.
After
And
the presentation.
ADA does come into that as well, again, for Parks and Rec. That's one of those areas where ADA and the 504 plan, et cetera, really fall into some of that. So.
Great. Is there an existing capital improvement plan within ADA for Parks and Rec?
No, there isn't. There's not an existing plan at this point in time per se. The last thing that we did was the North Dayton Playground in terms of as part of a grant. I think that Mr. Smith and I and others have talked about looking at a capital improvement process to continue it going. For example, looking at the playground and the entire plant area over at the town hall, the playground, the track area, et cetera, those, and, other aspects of other parks in town as well, in public space. But right now, there's not a separate capital improvement grant that I'm aware of that anybody has worked on for that yet, but it's in discussion.
And you're speaking broadly about Parks and Rec and ADA, right? Not just
Correct.
ADA?
Yeah, I'm speaking very broadly. I'm not speaking, to be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of Parks and Rec and the chairman, Mr. Smith, for that at all. He may have other things that he's thinking about that don't necessarily cross anything related to ADA at this point, and it doesn't hurt to touch base with him on that.
No, I'm sorry, let me clarify. What I meant was my question was, does ADA have a current capital improvement plan? And I believe your answer was no. My question then was, does that answer apply for Parks and Rec also? Was that a broad answer? Does Parks and Rec have a capital improvement plan of their own?
Right, and what I'm
No, also.
no, I am hearing the question, and what I'm suggesting is, I don't know that Kevin has a written plan per se. I know he has a plan at least in mind of what he would like to see, and some of it crosses the path of other things such as ADA, but some of it may not. So I think it's important to reach out to Kevin on that one first before we go any further with it.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a point regarding capital improvement plans. When capital improvement plans are put together, they are submitted to the capital improvement committee and they get prioritized, so a plan isn't a plan until it goes to them. I know there's been discussion over the last couple of years about a capital improvement work at the track, that whole amphitheater area, but it hasn't gone any further than discussion. So,
That would be a very large project. And then also, just to clarify what Paul is saying, when something goes to the capital improvement committee, and usually they're looking for, if I'm not incorrect, they're looking for plans that would be, potentially onboarded within the next 5 years. There are also forms of funding, sources of funding, cost factors involved, and then they're prioritizing it. So a capital improvement, for example, for a fire station versus a capital improvement for the track area, depending upon the types of funding sources, might be given a different priority level.
correct. That is absolutely correct.
Which makes perfect sense.
No, correct, absolutely correct, not crap.
So number 20 is kind of related to this, Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Yeah.
I don't know how different those would be, they seem pretty similar.
Number 20, develop a Parks and Recreation master plan. Yeah, I think that would probably tie together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna put those.
But in both of those cases, that would kind of fall under Parks and Rec.
I think so too.
But it would be good to know if they have one so that we can.
If there is a master plan.
We're aware of it in our work, but.
At least we could be versed in what their goals are as they pertain, or in that those gray areas that they overlap with us.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move on right now. We've reached that point. I know what's next is the open space action item priorities, and I wanted to carry this forward because I believe that we're doing this, we agreed, we're doing this at the same time as the action item, and maybe I can just make it a / consider priorities, but I'm carrying this forward just so that we don't lose sight that what we're doing is going through the action items now, and that we want to go back through and figure out what our priorities are. So if there's a motion on the table to table old business item number 2 of open space action item priorities to the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion. I, Leonard Hall, would like to make a motion to table old business item 2, discuss, review, and act open space action item priorities to the August meeting.
Second.
I'd like to entertain an idea of amending that to include also tabling and including the action items, and we'll just throw everything together. That way we know what our next meeting is. Are you good with that?
Oh, well, yeah, so continue the current discussion number 1.
Yeah, and then
to
table number 2.
as amended.
Isn't it, you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
thank you.
Then that would seal up all that business right there. And we know what our next meeting already looks like. I like it. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? There is discussion on the floor, just so that our community members know that you do have a minute to chime in if you would like.
I do,
Again, as it pertains to the motion on the floor right now.
oh, no.
Okay, all right, we're gonna take it to vote. All the ayes?
Leonard Hall is an aye.
Danica Belknap, aye.
Robert Gear, aye.
Jonathan Gale, aye.
Motion passes. We will move these items to next month's August 7th agenda. On to new business. As this is put forward, it was brought to my attention through some research that I had done on my own, and then I should say that's how I found it, and then I confirmed it with somebody at the town hall, that it is a tradition within the town of Dayton every fiscal year to establish the committee roles. Tonight, if the committee would like it, we could entertain a motion to simply keep the rules from 2024 to 2025 as is, and we can be done. But I did not want to even though it was 2 months ago, you guys tapped on me, I didn't want to just take control. So I want to put it out there. So there y'all have it. That's why that's there.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that
Yes, sir.
that the rules that are currently in place for the Open Space Committee continue to be governed as the same as they have been for the prior fiscal year.
Leonard Hall seconds the motion.
Is there any discussion? All the ayes?
Leonard Hall is an aye.
Danica Belknap, aye.
Jonathan Gale, aye.
Robert Gear, aye. Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. All righty, now we will open up for public input at this time. I don't see any others on, but we do have a member of the community with us. Ms. Laura Smith is still here. You're a trooper for hanging in there with us. I'm gonna open the floor to you.
I have a comment about Action 16, something
Yeah.
that came to me I'm a former science teacher. And when I see education programs and involving Bristol Aggie, I'm just thinking of this wonderful space that we have for birds and butterflies and having the students do their research and having signage on this property as to why things are the way they are. Like, I don't know if you noticed at Bristol Aggie, there's,
The long grass, for
Yes.
example.
Yes.
yes.
I know, yeah, sorry.
Yes. So that's one comment. Do you want me to talk to the superintendent about what we discussed tonight?
I would never say no to that. I mean,
know.
this is a public forum, absolutely. Whatever you like.
I know public input is supposed to come from the public to us, but I have a request of you as a member of the trustees. If you could bring it back for a discussion item to the trustees of how the Bristol Aggie and the town of Dayton could work closer together with many different programs, and we've talked about several this evening. I'm not sure of what they could do for the Agricultural Commission. That would be wonderful, and tell them that we're open to having meetings so we can have that discussion. What can you do to help Dayton? Because it would help their students as well.
Can I ask, we're just seeing the bats and butterflies and so forth. Is there currently any kind of signage there that explains what that is? Or is there nothing?
At Bristol Aggie, there is signage there as to the reason why they have a big section of uncut grass.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Thank you.
So is that area, like, are you talking about public education? Like, is that an area that's accessible and visible to the public where they could see the signage? Or are you saying that we could replicate that elsewhere?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've talked with the principal about what's going on with just the field of corn. and educating, because people sit in that traffic line for quite a long time at that, like, have signage out there explaining what's going on with the corner drops, and what, like, and before that was actually the hay. Yeah, just look,
That's a good
brings
idea.
up, you know, some data,
Thank you.
people.
No,
so
this-
people know about it.
I- What this does though, is this goes back to the discussion we were having a little bit about, if we had a table, for example, in September, and if we had somebody from the Aggie there to talk about the open space of the Aggie, the fields, for example, and what it represents and what it's for, and what it does not only for agriculture, but for the environment and so forth, and somebody was there to answer questions about that, that's part of what we're about. And I think it would be important to think about that. And maybe that's something you could approach the superintendent about and ask if the superintendent is willing to consider having somebody there with some information about what the open space represents and what it does for the community, as well as the students. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Well, that's-
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. All right. That is all the time we have tonight for public input. We're going to move on to review the minutes from our regular meeting. There was a miscommunication between myself and the committee clerk. I understood the request to get these January 3rd and February 7th of 2024 meeting minutes on this agenda. So that is not going to happen tonight. We're not going to talk about the 3rd or January 3rd or February 7th because they're actually not ready. So I won't have those for the committee until next meeting in August. So we're going to carry that forward. So tonight we can look at the minutes from June 5th. I'm sorry, let me make that clear. Tonight we're looking at the minutes only from June 5th, our last regularly scheduled.
Do we need a motion to table that? Just,
I don't think so, because it's not a business item, it's
Okay.
just housekeeping.
Okay.
So we do have the draft, I did send out the draft here, I have it printed, I'm sorry, Mr. Gale, I don't know that you have this available to you.
The draft for what specifically?
The minutes for June 5th?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah.
Oh, you did, okay, good, all right, so then you're up to date. All right, so then, is there a motion on the floor to accept the minutes as written?
Mr. Chairman, I, Leonard Hull, would like to make a motion to approve the Open Space Committee regular meeting minutes of June 5th, 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Leonard Hull is an aye.
Danica Belknap, aye.
Jonathan Gale, aye.
Robert Garrett, aye. Motion passes unanimously. All righty, folks, well then, we are at that time. We're a minute till. I can keep you all in perpetual state of seconds, or unless there's a motion on the floor to adjourn.
Just to let everyone know very quickly for our next meeting, I will be back in Massachusetts at the end of the month. I do have a surgical appointment that morning on one of my eyes. So depending upon how I feel and how I look, because I'm sure one eye will be fully covered, I will either be on Zoom again or I'll physically be there in person and scare the heck out of everyone. I'll have to see how it goes.
I'm sure you'll be smashing, Mr. Gale.
Well, I go to conference. Either way, let you know.
All right. So I believe, is there a motion? Did I hear a motion to adjourn?
I, Leonard Hull, motion to adjourn.
Okay, for a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Leonard Hull is an aye.
Danica Belknap, aye.
Jonathan Gale, aye.
Robert Garrett, aye. All right, let the meeting, let the record reflect an adjournment at 7 p.m.
Thank you all. Have a good Fourth.
Thank you.
Thank you, be
Bye,
safe,
Jonathan.
have a good time.
Thank you.
That'd be